What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Movie Emporium's TV review of the Apple TV Plus original series, Smoke Season 1. This will follow Episode 3, which is called Weird Milk, and is directed by Chappelle. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this was a little bit of a mixed bag when it comes to its kind of overall tone and what it's trying to do. It's still a really good episode. I still really enjoyed it, but it is kind of all over the place when it comes to like how many stories it's trying to juggle and whether the stories are really interesting. And I think the characters, the Freddies and the Daves and the Michelles are really interesting. I just think problem is that these stories are a little too by the book, a little too convoluted to be fairly honest. I think the fact that we know Dave is the other arsonist now makes the story a little rote, to be fairly honest. And what I mean by that is Dave is writing a story about an arsonist. He knows how arsonists operate. It's kind of, we do a lot of like, we see inside the story that he's writing and how he kind of reconfigures it. And it doesn't make for a really interesting kind of storytelling device, to be fairly honest. I think it's an idea of like, how does this guy who is clearly not a good person is very much having a problem in his home life that he tries to rectify, and he's like cleaning the bedroom and stuff like that. But I think he's just, now that we know he's like not a good person, I think it makes for a kind of lower level character arc. I think Taron Egerton's really good in the series. I think he has a lot of fun. You have his like the double kind of like double sided to his character. And he's very much in that Dexter realm, so we know what his persona is, like alternate persona is. But like the stuff he's writing isn't really that interesting. It's kind of cool, I guess, to see how he rewrites like the guy with the milk and the milk jug and stuff like that. How you would kind of fix those problems if you're a writer. But most of the story is more about Michelle, the Jurnee Smollett's character's journey into kind of her psyche and what she's having to deal with and how people view her. This wayward individual who seems very, what I would call, damaged. In a lot of respects, it's a very interesting dynamic to a character who we've seen flashes of some kind of fire that she was involved with or something of that nature. And we find out more and more that her mother was on drugs and was having a psychotic break or something like that because she locks Michelle's character in, like as a young kid in the closet and puts handcuffs on. And there's a point where we actually see a gunshot and blood hit the face of the child. So I don't know what that means. I don't know if like somebody that she knew or somebody that like her sister or something like that was, or her mother. I mean, I don't entirely know what they're aiming for, but it seems like that one side of the family is not really happy with the fact that she is not wanting her mother to get out of the psych ward or the prison or whatever she's in. And we'll see how that plays out later on in the story. But going back to Dave's character, the fact that Michelle knows and has inklings that Dave is the other arsonist by the stuff on the wall is making Dave less and less interesting, more of a here's the ice cream killer story. We need to find a way to stop Dave and stop him from doing what he's doing, because I'm assuming the other arsonist, or the arsonist that destroys that lady's car, is him. And then he shows up later on as the arsonist investigator and stuff like that. And I don't know. I just don't find Dave's character really that interesting. It's nothing against Taron Egerton. I just think his character needed more arc to his story before the reveal happens. I think if you had done this once again, episode 4 or 5, I think it would have been a much more kind of, like when the ice cream truck killer was Dexter's brother. It's like, oh, okay, I get that. That makes sense. We can see some back history. But because they showed it in episode 2, it kind of makes it more difficult to kind of really justify his character sometimes. But it doesn't take away from like the character being fun and entertaining. There's a point where Michelle is asking for QR codes and stuff like that, and the great Kinnear character is like, oh, let me ask Santa Claus because we have no budget for that. And we see Dave laughing, and he's a character that is, they're trying to make it like what they're more successful with Freddie, which is a character that's very flawed and a character, but he seems like he's more rooted in, like, he thinks he's getting away with it more than so on and so forth. But I don't know. We'll see how Dave's character plays out. Maybe it'll get much more interesting. I have read from some reviews that it does get much more interesting, so we'll see how that plays out. Before we get into the real Michelle stuff, the Freddie stuff is fascinating because Freddie, as much as you hate the fact that he's the arsonist, the one who lights the milk jug bottles on fire, there is a sadness to his character, a kind of depression, because he has this other character named Lee, who of course is like, you could quote unquote say he's his best friend in a lot of respects, but he's a guy that kind of puts him down for trying to be something better. Freddie's character trying to be something better, but really he is a guy who is just I don't think he understands like what Freddie is trying to comprehend, which is he needs more out of life, and what he's doing is a way for him to justify his existence in this world. And I appreciate the fact that he tries to go in. He's very unsuccessful of, the nature of, the interview, which goes poorly wrong for him, but he thinks he does nice. He's checking the emails later on, and I like this actor who's playing this character because he plays him so soft spoken. He plays him so earnestly, but we know he has a darker inside, which kind of is sad in a lot of respects, and it makes it harder to root for him because you know what he's capable of. Like when he sets the stove on fire and he gives that look to Lee's character, he has a really dark side to him, but you want him to succeed as something more than what he's giving. He's been put into a predicament. He's been put into a box that he is unfortunately not able to get out of. And whether he sets more fires, we'll see, because he is trying to turn over a new leaf with trying to get the job. But with everything going against him, I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. And I think the actor does a really fantastic job of playing Freddie, who's one of the more interesting characters in the show. It's just sad that you can't really root for him to succeed because of what he's known for doing, what he has been doing since that first episode. But we'll see how his character gravitates. We'll see, once again, if he'll lean more into the firebug situation. Once again, this is based off a podcast about a firebug and stuff like that. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's kind of the other storyline. Dave, once again, is just writing a book, and he doesn't really have much of a storyline, to be fairly honest. The big stuff is how Michelle's character arc is portraying, because now she's officially, in my book, the main character of the show. She's the individual that we were most focused on from a lot of this episode and pretty much this series, because she's good at what she does. She goes to a psychiatrist who talks about her shortcomings and her dealing with the things she's dealt with, and we see that what we're seeing and what the psychiatrist says is she's a very unstable person. But as we're seeing in her investigations and stuff like that, she's very capable of what she can do, and she says she's really good at this one thing. So therefore, we see her character arc start to play out, and why the things of her past and why the character played by Rafe Spall has kind of molded her into this one focused situation where she can determine, like we see on the board, like I said earlier, with Dave's misshifts, his logs, and stuff like that. She goes and finds one of the cigarettes with a quarter on it. And she's being kind of sidestepped at every turn, because she is really trying to be a good person, rather than trying to be a strong-willed person. But once again, the dynamics of the nature of, because she's African American, she's a woman, the nature of the DEI situation that a lot of people complain about, which is ludicrous. But you hear it in her thoughts, and you hear it through the nature of how she's treated by the arsonist lead director, the great Kinnear character, how she's kind of treated with Rafe Spall, who's they can't do anything about checking the cigarette because there's no lead investigation. She's like, I have an investigation. She's like, well, we can go have a drink and maybe that'll work. It's just she's in that scenario where it is very much a man's world, and she's trying to get past that, and she's trying to move past that. And on top of that, she's having to deal with the situation, the simple fact that she is not well liked from her family. Her family is very frustrated with her, with the simple fact that she doesn't want her mother out of jail. She does take care of her niece, which is a really nice and sweet scene where they have talks, and then like I said, we see flashbacks to what really happened to her, kind of in the moment. And when she goes to the courthouse or the hearing, and she is late, but she says what she needs to feel, but Priest is against her, her own family's against her, as we see. I think it's either the brother or the husband, the stepbrother or whatever, gets on her, and she's really drunk and she threatens him, and it really is just a very dimensional character when it comes to the struggles and the nature of what she is trying to do, what she is trying to instill upon the world, and how broken her character seems to come off, even though it's not really her fault. And she is, like I said, the most dimensional character. And I think Jurnee Smollett deserves an Emmy nomination for her performance, because it is a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of mental stress that she's having to put herself into in this character's tropes, in this character's world, and how she has to handle things. And I think it's a wonderful performance. I think the unfortunate nature is, because the story is kind of all over the place with the Dave story and the Freddie story, that her focus gets kind of almost side shifted sometimes, and it almost feels like there may be a little too much going on in the 42 minutes in this episode, but it doesn't take away from, I still think this is a fantastic episode. I still think it's a great episode. It's just, it struggles under the weight of so many things going on at once. It feels like it's a little unfocused sometimes, with like all the things it has to jumble. And, you know, as much as I like Rafe, Spall and Great Kinnear, when they're in there, it feels like the story just kind of stops to a standstill, but you have to have those characters to do what they need to do to like lift the characters going forward. But once again, now that we know Dave is the arsonist, now that we know Michelle kind of knows he's the arsonist and she kind of suspects he's the arsonist, the Freddie situation, the nature of like the home life of Dave and the situation of the home life of Michelle, it is reason why I think the show is interesting and why it's called Smoke, because when there's fire, when there's smoke, there's always fire, and fire builds and builds and builds till it explodes into crescendo and destroys everything, and that's what this show is kind of representing. But overall, I love this show. I really do. It's really interesting. I'm hoping it just continues to be good. And also, one thing I haven't talked about yet that I do have to bring up is I'm a huge Radiohead fan. I've always been a huge Radiohead fan, and Tom York doing the main theme for this episode really gives it an interesting portrayal and aura that he's known and capable of doing. So it has a really unique take to it, especially in the opening scenes and stuff, like opening like intro. And I really love that Tom York is doing the song to this, or at least, you know, maybe it's from an album that he did, but it's a really good song. But with that said, that's my overall take on this episode. It's good. It's a little all over the place when it comes to what it's trying to do, but I'm still going to give it like an 8.5 out of 10 because I still think it's a really good episode. I think it has really good dimensional work from Jurnee Smollett, and I think they need to coerce and massage Dave's character, and same thing with Freddie a little bit, to get them into a much better place than where they're at right now, because they feel like just kind of they're just in there for the story of the week type of thing. So that's my overall take on, of course, episode 3, which of course is called Weird Milk, which I actually like that name now that I know the episode. But yeah, so that's my take on Smoke season 1 episode 3, Weird Milk. So anyways, thank you so much for watching my review. I do appreciate it. Comments below, what do you think of this episode overall? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Tell me what you liked about it, all that good stuff. But otherwise, if you like what you see on this video, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at top to find what's coming next. If you liked the video, awesome. Hit that like button. And as always, we'll see you guys on the next video. Peace out, guys.